I don't think my presentation is going to last as long as it should. And you can look behind me and see why. You know, because these plots were built a little bit too late. They were seeded a bit too late, so it's almost impossible to see any differences in the various treatments. However, the primary reason why I was asked to give a presentation today was on nitrogen, and especially when it comes to the placement of nitrogen fertilizers. So what I'd like to do is I would like to start by, and hopefully you should be able to see this board there, by what is the basic principle of not only nitrogen but all the fertilizer application today. But especially with nitrogen, because of all the environmental concerns that we have, real or unreal, it's entirely how you feel about it. We do have to adhere to something that scientifically shows a good, way of applying fertilizers. And of course, the 4R nutrient stewardship principle, where we apply the right source at the right rate, the right place, and at the right time. And when we do that, we fulfill economic response for you people as producers, environmental for the environment in general, and as well as social, because these days we are faced with a number of social issues as far as the use of fertilizer is concerned. So this is extremely important. Now, in order for us to understand the use of fertilizer, I think it's very important to understand how nutrients, and in particular nitrogen that we're talking about, are being taken up by plants. And here it shows you the nutrient biomass and uptake by wheat on this side. I don't know if you can see it over there, and canola on this side. And this blue line here represents the growth of the plant. The red line represents nitrogen, the green potassium, same thing here, red and green. And then down here the blue and the red represent phosphorus and sulfur. Phosphorus and sulfur, you can see for canola, the sulfur is a little bit higher than it will be for wheat. But what is really important to notice here, which, we'll come back to that, but it's extremely important from a fertilizer user's point of view. Look at this. 75% of the nutrient uptake takes place the first quarter of the plant's life. So it's extremely important to have nutrients available at the beginning of the plant growth. Okay, so that's very important to keep in mind. Like this is actually back, this is 2 sites from Alberta and 2 sites from Manitoba. And we went out every week. We went down every week and we took dry matter yield and we measured the nutrients in, I'm sorry. That's okay.
I'll hold it for you.
No, actually this one we just compromised putting it there. It's not meant to be there.
Okay, I'll hold it for you.
We thought it'll help.
Tell me when to switch.
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm sorry. So, see, these 2 sites are in Alberta, Carstairs and Olds, and these 2 sites are in Manitoba. And what is really important, the line represents the buildup of mass, plant mass, and the other line represents the uptake of nitrogen. This is for canola. And look again, the maximum rate of nitrogen uptake occurred at the 6-leaf stage. It didn't matter, like the plots in Manitoba were seeded 2 to 3 weeks later than Alberta. So it didn't matter when they were seeded. The maximum, it occurred at a 6-leaf stage. So the moral of the story is, again, to repeat, it is extremely important to have the nitrogen early in the growing season. That's why you may have heard it before, any nitrogen that is applied for wheat prior to the first node being visible, and in the case of canola prior to the 6-leaf stage, goes towards yield. Any nitrogen that is applied after that stage, some of it will go towards yield, but the majority will go towards protein formation. And when it comes to canola, you don't really, I mean, right now when we sell canola, they don't measure oil. But when you increase the protein in canola, you drop the oil. And if, you know, at some point they decide to start measuring oil when you sell canola, that won't be an acceptable, you know, thing to be doing. But anyway, I just thought that I should show that to you.
So is there a difference, mid-row banding versus side banding?
We are coming to that. So, oh, that's okay. I have them in order. Yeah, thank you. So, first of all, I'd like to put this.
Okay.
Oh, and then, okay. So when it comes to the right place, which is the placement, the major goals of the placement are to minimize losses, toxicity risk, but the most important thing is to minimize costs. And also to maximize the availability of the nutrient, the positional availability, and also, extremely important, economic efficiency. So I'll go through some of the placements and describe the pros and cons of them. So here, this is a trial that it was carried out back, actually I published that in 2011, and we compared side banding, dribble banding, seed row placement of 4600. At that time, UAN was still available, now there isn't, you know, and we looked at seed row and off the seed row. And look at that, in all cases, we went 0, 27, 54, and 81 pounds per acre. And I know it looks funny, why would you do that? But we do, in science, we do things in kilograms per hectare. So when you convert to pounds per acre, it looks a bit goofy, but you can see there were absolutely no differences except where we applied urea seed row. And after 54, about 40 pounds, you can see that we started to lose yield because of the toxicity. And this is another one that was carried out in Indian Head in Saskatchewan in 2014. They put band at 1 to 1.5 inches depth, band 2.5 to 3 inches depth, and they side banded urea. And look at that, the difference. You know, really, really. Side banding right now is probably one of the best ways of. So when it comes to mid-row banding that you were asking, what are the pros and what are the cons of mid-row banding? The pros are the optimum fertilizer safety because it's away from the, you know, maintain seedbed quality because, you know, it's every double, like if you have 10 inches spacing, it's every 20 inches. Functions well in a wide range of soil conditions, and also you can use existing equipment all you have to do is not, not use one of the, instead of applying fertilizer every 10 inches, block the one and go every 20. But there are some disadvantages to it. And the major disadvantage is the distance from the plant root. Now you're creating, from one placement, one row, it's close, but the other one now is quite a bit far away. So that's one of the disadvantages. The other is that when you put every 20 inches and you put it mid-row, if you don't control the weeds, you can have weeds taking up the nitrogen that otherwise would have been available to the plant. You need 50% more openers, and of course, you have to seed place some fertilizer in order to get the maximum yield. You won't, like back in my Westco days, we had a 20-year trial. It's already published in the Canadian Journal of Plant Science, good old John Harapiak. And we went for 20 years, and we found out that after 20 years that the best way of, and we compared seed placement, dual banding, and mid-row banding, oh no, it was 30 years, my apologies. And it was at the Breton Farm, one trial, and Ellerslie was the other. 30 years of comparing mid-row banding to seed placement. Huge differences. Seed placement, maximum yields every year. Mid-row banding, as we went off, year after year, we lost more potential yield. So another thing about mid-row banding, and it's only not mid-row banding, but it gets worse with mid-row banding because you have twice as much concentration of products, is the creation of what we call hot bands. When you put nitrogen and phosphorus together, what happens is nitrogen dissolves, it creates kind of a halo around the phosphorus fertilizer. Unfortunately, the roots cannot infiltrate that. And it takes 2 to 3 weeks for the roots to reach the phosphorus. So keep that in mind, that you are creating these hot bands. And here with the research we did back, we're talking now, if there is a 12-inch spacing, the recommended rate for mid-row banding is between 80 and 90. If you go over that, then you start creating these hot bands. If it is 16 inches, it's between 60 and 70, and 24 inches, 40 to 50. So you can see that we can create these hot bands, and as a result, create a phosphorus deficiency, because phosphorus is needed really early in the plant growth. Okay? All right, so now we can look at the side band. Rigas? Yes, I'm sorry.
No, you're going to go there. Yep.
Side band?
Yep.
It's right there. So the pros, good fertilizer interception. Secondly, limited weed access to the fertilizer and good phosphorus availability, especially when it comes to phosphorus, because that's the one actually for nitrogen we know that it dissolves and moves around. The cons are soil disturbance. It's a little bit higher than what you would do otherwise. Moderate seedbed disturbance and moderately sensitive to soil conditions. But overall, side band works very well. It's becoming a more favorable placement. If you look now the statistics, the last few years, or the last stats, you will see that side banding gaining, like almost 62% or so of the farmers in Saskatchewan and Alberta are utilizing pretty much side band.
So how sensitive it is to speed of the drill?
It doesn't influence.
Okay.
The only thing again with sideband, what you have to be careful is separation sometimes, and there are some you know, you have to put at least 1 inch to the side and 1 inch below. Then you're no problem whatsoever. But you know, when you have a boot where you applying either the seed, the fertilizer in the middle and the seed with 2, you know, and that can create problems. So the other way around. So you have to be very careful with that. So the ammonia, you know, seed separation is critical. And of course, we all know that what happens is when you put urea, what is going to happen is it's going to be converted to ammonium. And when that conversion takes place, the pH increases, and I'll show that in a minute. And ammonium becomes ammonia. And that, of course, will increase the risk of having injuries. So 1.5, you can see when it comes to side banding, if you put everything with the seed, you have very poor separation, and that's not a good thing. Less than 1 inch, you have marginal separation. The good separation is 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And the best is 1 inch to 1.5 inches to the side and about 1 inch below. That is where you get. And actually I remember back in my U of S days, there was some research that was done in 1973, believe it or not, at Melford Research Station. They had already shown that. It's amazing, you know. So, all right, so you can see that's the inch, 1.5 inches, and that's less than 1 inch. You can see this is taken from, you know, some of the trials that we had set up back in the day. Now, another thing to remember about banding, and that's something that it's very important to grasp. Supposedly you have now a field and you're applying the fertilizer, you're banding, not mid-row banding, let's go with a banding every 10 inches, and you're down maybe, you know, 2-3 inches depth. Now, when we calculate the rate of fertilizer, when we say, okay, we applied 100 pounds or 80 pounds here, we mean for the whole field, okay? 100 pounds for the whole field. But when you apply 100 pounds in bands, you put the fertilizer in the bands, not the whole field. If you were to apply on the whole field what you have in the bands, and you have 10-inch spacing, multiply by 60. It would be 6,000 pounds, okay? Mid-row banding, which would be 20 inches, if you were to apply on the whole field what you have in the bands, would be times 120. So we're going to put 12,000 pounds. So keep that in mind. And why do you want to keep that in mind? Because now in the bands you have these very high concentrations of nitrogen, and you know that's where the toxicity comes. You know, you have to be very, very cognizant about that. You know. So another thing to be cognizant about is shallow banding. And shallow banding is banding anything less than 2 inches depth. And you know, now I'm retired, but during my, you know, working years, I would talk with farmers, you know, with like you, producers, especially the ones that were mid-row banding. And I would say, how deep do you go? Oh, you know, if I go down 2-3 inches, I'll never finish. I want to go fast, so I'm 1 inch, half an inch, 1 inch. That's shallow banding. This research started actually in Quebec, and that's by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Dr. Rochette did this research, and what he did is he banded 5 centimeters depth. He broadcasted and incorporated. He broadcasted, and he broadcasted, but he treated the urea with a urease inhibitor, in this case agrotane. So look at that. When he banded, the losses were 26, 27%. When he broadcasted, the losses were reduced to about 15%. When he incorporated, when he broadcasted, and that was a little bit of a dry, it was up to 7%. And when he used a urease inhibitor, it was down to 3-4%. Now, to make it a little bit clear, in this particular case, the soils were dry. So when you have a dry soil and you incorporate and there's a little bit of moisture underneath, ladies and gentlemen, the worst case scenario for volatilization losses is to have a little bit of moisture. You know, there is some research, and unfortunately I don't have it. There is some research that was carried out at Washington State University, and they showed what they did. There was a dry soil. They went and applied anywhere between 1/8, 2/8 of an inch up to an inch of water irrigation. The losses with 1/8 of an inch were up to 70%. The losses with 1 inch, they were down to 5-7%. So there were, you know, in the past there were people that were, and actually there's a good example north of Swift Current. There was a gentleman there that phoned me, and what am I going to do? You know, I have to broadcast. I say, you know something? Do you expect any rain? He says, yeah, I hear the forecast tomorrow is going to rain. I said, go out and do it right now. And he was so thankful because it did rain. Had it not rained, I would have been in trouble. But it rained, and he got some, actually I went and visited some magnificent yields. So keep that in mind if it's dry like it is right now, you know. If you spread urea here, oh my goodness, you're going to be going up in the air. And if you get a little bit, you know, a millimeter or two of rain, it's going to be even worse. So keep that in mind. I think it's very, very important. So another thing to keep in mind is also that leaching and denitrification losses. Now, in our environment, unless if you are in irrigation, you know, and you apply, I don't know, some 18 inches of water or 14, you may get some leaching. Otherwise, you know, going back in history, because I worked on that, when we found residual nitrogen at depth was prior to the 1990s, in the 80s and 60s and 70s, where people had 50% stubble volatilization of urea or due to denitrification of nitrate. And those, you know, when you apply urea, as I mentioned to you before, it goes into the soil and it becomes ammonium. And then ammonium, through the action of some soil microorganisms, it's converted into nitrite and then nitrate. And this actually conversion is mediated by an enzyme. It's called ammonium monoxygenate. So if we can regulate the action of that enzyme, we can regulate the losses or manage them as best we can. So now the thing is that when it comes to being nitrate, you can have losses due to leaching, but the majority of the losses, and that is the concern that we have today, is in the form of nitrate. Nitrous oxide. I was asked a couple of years ago, I gave a presentation, actually I was asked to give a presentation, and they asked me, can you give us an idea of how nitrate is lost up in the air? And we all know that the majority of the denitrification is molecular nitrogen. Is not, nitrite that we are, concerned from an environmental point of view. It's normally less than 5% of what is being lost due to denitrification. But we all know that nitrite is 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide, so that's why we're concerned. So they asked me if I would go and find some research of that so I can show it to the producers. Guess what? Guess how far back I had to go to find research?
60s.
No, 1988. And he was a fellow. Actually, I was still a professor at the Soil Science Department in Saskatchewan, and there was a fellow that did his PhD on that. And he measured the losses, the denitrification losses, and also he found out that 30% of the denitrification occurred during snowmelt. But in order to do that, you have to use a certain technique. And nobody's using that. So, when people give you all these losses, is the nitrite? Yes, but that's only a small percentage. Okay, so keep that in mind, that the majority of losses is that, So we can then apply a nitrification inhibitor, and I didn't want you to think that I'm advertising anything, but I used to work for, I retired. Super U it's a product that contains a nitrification inhibitor, and it has been extremely effective in reducing. Now, since I left, or the last year I was there, 2021, they introduced a new product now that it's Super U has both nitrification and volatilization inhibitors in. They've introduced now a product that it's only nitrification inhibitor, Centuro, and that I did some work, with that I don't have anything to show you, but well, that's when, see what happens is the urea in the soil during the winter remains as urea. And then when the snow melt occurs, because the temperature goes up, it's converted into ammonium, and then up it goes. Yeah. And also, in order to have denitrification, you have to have water. If you don't have water, if you ask me right now, should I use Super U? I would say, heck no. Why? It's dry here. You're not going to save anything. You're not going to gain anything out of it. Because you have to have water in order to have denitrification. And that's where the snow melt comes,
It has to be about 7 or 8 degrees too, right?
Oh, it has to be at least 10 degrees. Yeah.
Wasn't there something about applying onto frozen ground about the enzyme will activate? When it's not like
Yes, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You are one ahead of me, but I'll pull it out. This is work. Montana State University, there is a professor there. They did many years of applying urea on frozen soil. And this is just, if you go onto the website, Google Montana State University, Dr. Eagle, you're going to find, piles and piles. But look what he found. When it was getting cold, this is April, this is urea, and this is urea with agrotane. The losses, they're different. There is losses more, 8 and 4, but not. But look at that, go to November, where it's cold. And urea, the losses are 31%. You're absolutely right. We got a lot of losses. However, look what happened when he used agrotane. It went down to 3.8. Same thing here in March. 36% losses with urea. When he put agrotane, it was down to 18. Overall, this is over a period, of 2 years or 3 years. You found that the losses of urea are 20%. When you treat them with a urease inhibitor, it drops down to 7. So you're absolutely right.
But it was something about the enzymes when there's ice or something. The enzyme, the prill would melt right around it. And that was just enough moisture to activate the enzyme or something, right?
Yeah.
But it was ice.
It was ice. It was ice. But still, you're right. Yes, you're right. Another thing. Okay. And that's, just talking about very quickly the urease inhibitor. I've already mentioned it. But this is a really, really good example. If the soil, the pH of the soil is less than about 7.2, what dominates in the soil solution is the ammonium ion. As the pH goes up, you can see the ammonium dissipates, and in its place we have ammonia. And we all know ammonia is a gas, so off it's going to go in the air. Why are we concerned about it? Well, when you put urea in the soil, it goes through this reaction. It's called hydrolysis. And hydro in Greek is water. So what happens, hydro, and it's mediated by an enzyme, urease. What happens is the urea is converted to ammonium. But at the same time, you got this nasty molecule there, carbonate. And what does that do? It increases the pH. And here is an example where the urea, this soil had a pH of 6.9, and look next to the urea, 9.5. And you, like I said, if you go to Montana State University, you'll find great examples up to 10.3, really increase in the soil pH due to the, hydrolysis of urea. So what happens now, all of a sudden, you got ammonia instead of ammonium. And ammonia is a gas, and up it goes in the air. That's why dip banding works. You still have ammonia produced and everything, but you got 2.5, 3 inches of soil on top of it, and it absorbs it, so you don't have any loss. And you know how dip banding came into play in Western Canada? Do you know the story? Back in the 60s, 70s, when they brought anhydrous ammonia to Western Canada, people were getting a heck of a lot better yields than when they were applying urea, because at that time all the urea was broadcasted. So people said, forget about urea, we're going to start using anhydrous. And good old John Harapiak with Wesco said, whoa, wait a minute. Chikai, I think he said. Let's put urea where we put anhydrous and see what happens. And all of a sudden, wow, same or better results. So that's how dip banding started in Western Canada, by putting urea at depth, and that's still remains the number one, method of applying. Now, what happens though, and I don't have the stats. I didn't bring the stats with me. What is happening now, if you look at the size, the average size of the fields in Western Canada, if you go back in the 50s, it was 400 acres. Now it's 1,700 acres. What does it mean? The farms tend to get larger. Like I've been to farms with 20,000, 40,000 acres, you know, I mean, easy. Now these people, they have to finish. You know, leaving 1,000 acres behind, it's a heck of a lot of money. Even for a small farmer that has 500, if you leave 50 out, it's a lot of money. So for these people, they have to apply the fertilizer. So what do? They go into broadcasting. Why? Because you can broadcast at 4.5 miles per hour. You deep band at what? 14, 15? So it takes 12 if you're lucky, if you shallow band, you know. So, you know, people are, we see a tremendous, although the government say do not broadcast, and all, we see a move towards broadcasting simply because the size of the farms is increased. So this is an example from the University, a PhD thesis from the University of Saskatchewan, where the fellow who did his PhD, he was from Finland, Nils Janikos. He measured the losses by broadcasting urea, and you can see they were up to, you know, 12 parts per million, you know, a lot of huge losses. Then they brought a product from Europe, Alzon, which is a nitrification inhibitor. Then they used agrotane, see how it dropped. And then they used Super U. And this is the control where they didn't put any fertilizer. So you can see how, you know, the losses were reduced. And there is all kinds of research. Actually, Brian Barris, that he just published a paper. I was talking to him at lunchtime, and I said, Brian, good for you. He just published a paper with the research they carried out in the 3 prairie provinces. He's part of that group. And they're measuring these losses, and they found tremendous improvement. Now, another thing that I want to mention, I've got 2 more, and maybe 3 more. I still have 7 minutes. When it comes to enhanced efficiency products, I don't know if you were familiar of the definition of an enhanced efficiency product. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But prior to 2013, April 1st, 2013, that's not an April Fool's joke, but that was the time the regulation for fertilizers was abandoned. Since April 1st, 2013, there is no more regulation for fertilizer in terms of efficacy, in terms, you know, quality. You can sell whatever, and you can say whatever the heck you want to, it doesn't matter. Nobody's checking, nobody's gonna, you know, you have to go and sue if you, but anyway, from a government perspective. But if you went into the laws at that time, you would find out that an enhanced efficiency product is a product that leads into the increased uptake of a nutrient. It doesn't matter what it is. It increases the uptake of the nutrient, and as a result, reduces losses and so on and so forth. So the moral of the story is that if you have a product that increases, say nitrogen, if you have a product that increases the nitrogen uptake, and your recommended rate is 100 pounds, why would you use 100 pounds with that product? It doesn't make any sense. You should be using maybe 80. And sure enough, you know, that's how it works. If you have, an enhanced efficiency product, and it works because there's a lot of them out there. Trust me, I give a presentation on that, but nevertheless, if you use 80 or 70% of the recommended rate using that product, you should be getting the same yield. So keep that in mind, you know. And that's another thing that Brian, in his paper that published, and actually, he's not here, but I don't know if you are reading The Canadian Agronomist, and Bruce Barker, he is actually with the other group. He wrote, he does excellent job of reviewing scientific articles. He reviewed that article, and it was in his last posting of Canadian. Anyway, so I just wanted to show you. Then the other thing is that things don't work all the time. Like, for example, look at this. This is research across 11 sites in Western Canada when I was still, and look at that. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10 of them are below the average, and 2, 4, 6 above the average. Why did we not get any benefit? There was no need for the product. These are yield increases. There was no yield increase because there was no volatilization. There was plenty of moisture, you know. Now, I agree that it's at the beginning of the season, it's very hard to tell what's going to happen, you know. But at least be cognizant of the fact that there has got to be, you know, there's got to be the right conditions in order to get an effect. And this here, the second one, is from the same sites where we used Super U. And you can see, you know, you have to have, I mean, here, this is from the University of Saskatchewan. I don't know what the heck they did. They got 60% yield increase, but, you know, and that year, you know, they got a lot of moisture, and that's why. But keep that in mind, okay? And then one thing, I was talking with Jamie, and I just thought I should throw that as a last one, and that is about top dressing. And this is from a paper. There was a master's thesis that was done at the University of Manitoba. Rolak is, you know, she did her master's with Don Flayton. You may recognize the name. But anyway, Christine works for, pardon me, for the Manitoba government. Anyway, what they did, and actually I was hoping when I was talking to Jamie that we'll do the same thing here. They covered half of the field, they did exactly the same treatments, except they covered half of the field with plastic, and the other, they left it bare. Okay? Exactly the same, replicated 4 times and 4 times, except one it was covered and the other it was bare. Now, look what happened. This is when the field was bare. And they sprayed UAN, you know, which is our liquid fertilizer, right? They got anywhere between 40 to just about 70% recovery. Look what happened when the ground was covered. The recovery was anywhere from 10 to about 20%, 25%. Why? The majority of, when you top dress, the majority comes from the roots. The stomata, or stomata, but in Greek is stomata. The stomata is the bottom. If this is the leaf, they're at the bottom of the leaf. So the absorption is not as great. Actually, I remember back in my university, my U of S days, there was a 1984 publication with, where they had used UAN liquid urea. And they got some spectacular results with liquid urea. And if you go down, I'm done. Yep. Okay. If you go down to the States, or I know back in Greece where we're spraying apple trees and so forth, we were spraying urea. We're not spraying UAN because the absorption is a heck of a lot higher. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention. And yeah.
Before you take that off, do you just want to ask a question for our Lethbridge County little door prize here? A brand new Yeti mug. So what's the one takeaway you want the audience to have?
Well, as I mentioned, because I talked about enhanced efficiency product, should be applying enhanced efficiency product today if you were to fertilize.
Should we apply an enhanced efficiency fertilizer? First one to answer.
Yes.
Yes? Is the answer yes? Oh! That's the answer. Right, to the lady in the back. All right, thank you very much.
Oh, cheers. Do you want this?
Yeah, I'll take it off for you.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah.